Hi, and welcome to this new episode of the Lightleaders. Today I'm with Josh, and I know you from Bali actually, because I met you at a conference because you're a builder, but I also didn't know you're a lot into a plant-based lifestyle and calisthenics. So today in this interview, we're going to talk about what you eat, how you developed your physique with calisthenics, and how you help people do that. We're going to talk about how you manage all that with a family and 5 children, I think.
Correct.
And also we'll put it all together because we're very aligned on how it starts with you and having great health, great physique, being fit, but at the same time, you're really passionate about what we call building the new us, building a better world for us and our children. So thank you so much for being on the show, Josh. And for the people who listen, I'll do chapters so you can go to the sections that interest you the most. If you want to support, you can share, like, subscribe as usual. So thank you, Josh, for joining us. And my first question to
Yes.
you is, what are you grateful for today?
Well, the first thing comes to mind is I want to say thank you for having me on, and it's an honor to be here. And I'm extremely grateful to be here in Bali right now for my family and to live in the home that I live in that synchronistically is lined up for us. And so, yeah, that's what I'm thankful for.
Amazing. So, Josh, I'd like to start with a little bit of background for people. I'd be interested a bit in your journey in becoming vegan. I think you've tried a raw vegan and also getting into really taking care of your like fitness and physique while working a lot at the same time. So, if you want to wrap up a bit the history and also how old are you, what you eat now?
Okay, sure. So I am 37 now, and I've been vegan for 15 years. And my procession uh, through that process, the start of it was around 19 years, whenever I was going through sort of like the kind of dark, angsty period where I was realizing so much of the things that were going on wrong with the world, but had no idea the solutions for them. And so I was having that sense of apathy and depression, if you will. And around the age of 20, I had a big breakthrough. I moved to Austin, Texas, and I was starting to like have a big kind of spiritual awakening, where I was learning a lot about. I originally started to look into the secret societies and masonry, and so from that I started realizing like a lot of things started making sense about why things were the way they were in the world, and how a lot of it's by design and not and the scarcity is actually manufactured, and etc. And so just in starting to have realizations about some of these things, I started to also realize that there was a massive potential for transformation and solutions. And so that was sort of a lifting for me. And during that period, I became a Kundalini teacher trainer. Not a Kundalini teacher trainer. I did a Kundalini teacher training and became a Kundalini teacher. And through that process, I was really inspired to shift my diet. So originally, it was for spiritual reasons. It was for becoming lighter, for becoming more energetic, and also I really aligned with the philosophy and just the idea of becoming a less dense sort of spiritual consciousness and that sort of thing. And so I originally went straight into a raw food diet in about 2008. I didn't have much guidance, but there was a pretty strong raw food movement in Austin. It was like very kind of raw food gourmet style. And so the way that I started doing raw was originally I was focused. I didn't have the context or the education to know that I really should have been focusing more on the fruits for the carbohydrates and for the energy and things. So I was just doing what I knew, and I was doing a lot of raw brassicas and raw vegetables and a little bit of fruit and probably too much nut butters and fat and stuff like that. And so even though I was having some real powerful cleansing experiences, I was also dealing with some digestive distress and gas and things like that. And so after about 3 years of eating that way, and also had I been doing the type of work that I do now and the amount of energy that I exert each day, I probably wouldn't have done so well. I was pretty much a single yoga guy who didn't have so much responsibility and could sleep in when I wanted to, etc. And so knowing how I felt then, I was not nearly as energetic as I was. So to get back on the story, I synchronistically met my wife, Alexa, who's one of the most amazing people I ever met. She's the love of my life. And she had already had a maybe 10-year experience being vegan and was deeply rooted in the macrobiotic culture. So macrobiotics it's more than just dietary recommendations. Even the word means the great life, macrobiotic, and it has to do with the understanding of yin and yang, 5-element theory, spiralic theory, and the application of this wisdom to make balanced dietary decisions, lifestyle decisions, etc., in order to have a great life. But for me, whenever she started showing me the way she ate, which is very rooted in like Japanese culture kind of cuisine, lots of whole grains, lots of cooked vegetables, seaweeds, beans, etc. That was a big step forward for me because I started to become much more carb centric. And that thing that I was yearning, which I think was just like a stable diet that felt like I could do it long term, and the fact that I wasn't feeling gassy and I was feeling a major shift for the positive in eating that way. Alexa and I basically, upon getting married, we ate that way together for probably 8 years. And then, long story short, I became a builder. We moved to Nevada City, California, and I was a natural builder out there. And we made a big shift. We got into like the Dr. Morse detox protocol, detox information. We kind of dove headlong into that and started doing high fruit, which is a bit taboo in the macrobiotic scene. But we dove into the high fruit, and this had some personal reasons. My stepson, Alexa's son, ended up who lived mostly with his dad at that point. He was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and so we dove into the Dr. Morse stuff because we had a deep aspiration and inspiration to potentially heal his condition as much as possible. And I think that we really are on to something important, and a big part of that was the realization of how important the fat content, keeping the fat content at 20% or below, around 15 to 20%, is like really the ideal kind of range for optimal insulin sensitivity. And so if a type 1 diabetic keeps their fat in the 15% range and avoids processed foods and stuff, they can reduce their insulin requirements by up to 80%. So that's how we went into the Dr. Morse stuff. We really wanted to help my stepson, and we did that for basically 3 years straight. So it was 100% raw, high fruit. We even went no salt for a long time, for about a year of that. And that was really amazing. Like I felt very energetic. I didn't really lose a whole lot of weight or anything. Like I didn't lose any weight. I don't know why I even said a whole lot. I didn't lose any weight in comparison to what I was eating on a macrobiotics diet. I was able to still build muscle as long as I was getting enough calories, right? And we sustained that for a while until about 3 years. We ended up having another move, and there was this big move. We were going to go to Costa Rica. It was right whenever COVID happened, and all the borders shut down. We moved, and we'd already moved back to Texas, where I'm from. And we kind of got stuck in Texas for a couple of years. And just with all the stress and with all of the challenges that we faced for keeping our children like happy and satiated on a raw vegan diet, and I just will like insert, it's a little bit challenging to get enough raw vegetables into children if you're not doing things like superfood smoothies and doing lots of dehydrating, because the kids really desire richness a lot of the times. They love the fruit. That was never a problem so much, but they really want that richness. And so we found a nice balance as after that raw bout at about 70 to 80% raw, still high fruit, mostly fruit throughout the day. And then we like to do wakame miso soup, millet or quinoa, and some beans most nights. And so that's basically where we're resting now. And I feel pretty amazing in that ratio at this point. Like I usually don't do I do fruit, breakfast and lunch. I don't do any intermittent fasting. I've done that in the past and stuff. and then a good hearty dinner at dinner time.
Nice. Thanks for sharing. And what do you feel like if you didn't have the family context? What do you feel? When do you feel you were your best? Do you feel it helps to have a little bit of that cooked food, like grains, into the diet for you?
That's an interesting question, because I really think that I can probably do fine on an all right raw diet, but I do through my own experience and through just understanding cellulose content in vegetables and things like that. I think that it's really important to juice vegetables and to incorporate some seaweeds into the diet. And also, if you're gonna go fully raw, then to also incorporate some chlorella and spirulina and some like sort of shilajit fulvic minerals into the diet, just to really keep the mineral content proper. Because I see a lot of people becoming depleted and even dealing with dental issues and things like that. And I could get kind of long-winded on that topic, about why I think people can become depleted on more, especially if they're going real high fruit and not getting enough dark leafy greens and enough vegetables in the diet and things. And I think that's a combination of soil depletion. We're not getting nearly the amount of nutrition in the foods that we used to. And another reason is, it's actually three parts. Another reason is due to over-hybridization of most of the fruits for high water, high sugar content in comparison to the mineral nutrient content that would have been more native to, say, like the kind of condensed berry type of fruits that are the ancestors of a lot of the fruits that we have today. And so even though those fruits are delicious and the fructose is amazing, it's totally like so human specific and so energizing to us. I think that if we don't kind of do some supplementation, we can still do it with whole foods and natural foods and things, but that we can become depleted. And so if I were to be 100% raw, I actually don't really think that I would want to get rid of wakame miso soup, which is wakame, carrots, onion, and some kale. And it's just so nutritious. It has iodine. It has so many minerals and nutrients. The broth is so powerful and everything. And it's so like non-mucus forming because there's none of the grains and beans or anything in there, that I really don't see a huge benefit in taking it to the point of actually removing the wakame miso soup. But if I were to do that, I would make sure I incorporated the things that I had suggested before, which is green juices, kind of avoiding the high oxalate ones such as beet greens, spinach greens, chard, that sort of thing, and focusing on the celery, some kale, cucumber, turmeric, etc., all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's pretty much a lot of what I'm doing, being very high raw, more than you, but actually including even seaweed, so things like wakame, or what we do a lot in Bali is simos from Nusa Lembongan. It's actually dried, and then we put it in water and in the sun, so it's still raw, but it's dried and then rehydrated.
Yeah, we do CMOS
really
too. They're probably from the same source, actually, because that's something I also left out. Like that's one I'd say is paramount and super important if you're gonna.
Yeah, but yeah, also the celery juice. Even here, like I'm in Germany for months, I bought a lot of celery. We have a blender, so it's a lot of fiber, but we blend it, and I think that really helps. But I also like, I think it's good not to be dogmatic. I mean, I'm the same like maybe once a week or something, I end up having cooked food and it feels good. And to me, it can feel better than especially the raw gourmet.
Yeah, I definitely feel better than the most important thing that I found over the years is, even though I think that like the electrical aspect and the enzymatic aspect of the raw foods is so super important, because we are energetic beings. We have an aura that's electrically fed by the electric foods that we put in our body. What is really the most obvious thing that aspect about diet, about how I feel, is the fat content. And so if I do raw gourmet, like even like a slice of some high cashew fatty cake, it's just like I feel it, and it's really hard for me to digest. It's hard for my whole family. And then I can feel the less efficient ability to metabolize carbohydrates for a day or so after that. So yeah, I'm on the same page with you. Heard that with that as well. So if I'm doing cooked, as long as I'm keeping it like I say, the 20% range, fat from calories from fat range is the range that I choose to promote, because that's a range that allows for people to still get plenty of richness in their diet with nuts and seeds and some avocado and things. But it's still going to really allow for really good insulin sensitivity. And then for diabetics and people who are more sensitive, having blood sugar issues, definitely suggest 15, even at the low end. You know, Dr. Doug Graham, he suggests 10%. I think that's a little low. I tried that, and I just didn't, I felt like I was lacking richness. And so whenever I'm craving stuff, it's like, there's a fine line between a natural appetite craving for something and then, you know, an addictive tendency towards rich foods. And I think that over the past 15 years, I've gotten very clear about which is which.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I heard you say also you did no salt, which I think is very revolutionary, because I think a lot of the food addictions, they actually a lot of salt, you know, the cheese or the ham or whatever. And so when you do no salt, also it really changes the taste buds, right?
Yeah, it's amazing when you go into that pattern, you can actually see how much the your taste buds shift and how delicious the food tastes on the other side of it. Right now, admittedly, we do a moderate amount of sea salt, trying to be, you know, of course, moderate with the things, but that's also that's just a, you know, kind of has a lot to do with the children as well, and just meeting them, because it's, you know, like you said, it's good to not be dogmatic and also to not be too rigid, because rigidity causes rebellion, and we really want to allow for our children to have experiences outside of our diet and things like that. And so we do indulgent things from time to time, but inevitably when we do these things, the kids and us are so clean and so like somewhat sensitive to non-human specific foods or excess quantities of certain foods that even the kids are very clear about how they feel when they do certain things. And so they have a reverence for the types of foods that we eat and the occasions that we do indulge. They know what they're getting into.
Nice. That's let's keep that topic for a little bit later. But yeah, I mean, I'm interested also in how it goes with your children. One last question on your more like nutrition health background is, I'm interested if you've done much with fasting.
I have done quite a lot of fasting. I have done more so I'm trying to think of where to start. Is I before I even got married, I started getting into water fasting, and I was doing 2 or 3 day water fasts and things like that. And basically for a little while there, I got really into it, and I was doing I was experimenting even with dry fasting and and expediting ketosis state. And so my experience with dry fasting which was based upon my research at the time, this is whenever I was probably like 27 or something like that, was I wasn't into long-term dry fasting. I wasn't into like wrecking my kidneys and things like that. But what I was into was expediting the and stimulating the start of ketosis much faster than would not happen on just a water fast only. And so what I would do is I would wake up, I would eat dinner, and then I would stop eating, and then I would wake up, and then that would be the dry fast day. And I would be prepared for 24 hours of dry fast. And I would usually time it for a day whenever we had a big load of mulch coming, because we had our own permaculture gardens back in Texas. And I would be the one who unloaded 5 yards of mulch, 5 cubic meters of mulch by myself. And I would actually do it in the summer. You know, it all sounds kind of crazy, but this is just like what I was inspired to do. I've always loved the heat. I've never had heat exhaustion. I've never had, I've been working manual labor. I grew up next to a dairy, and we hauled hay for my entire life. And so I'm was pretty in touch with my body. And I would unload an entire thing of mulch over about a 7-hour period during a hot summer day, which is like sometimes 35 Celsius plus, something like that. And I would sweat, I would burn up all the glycogen in my muscles, and that night I would most definitely be in ketosis, where in most cases you kind of have to suffer through this 2 days of really being hungry on a normal water fast to kick into the ketosis metabolism, which is where that's when you have the breakthrough and you're like, you don't feel the hunger anymore, and you just like feel really clear-headed. And it's because you're no longer starving for glucose, you're actually burning your ketones and starting to like get into the actual real detoxifications part where you're releasing the toxins from the that are stored in the fat and stuff. So I would do 1 day of dry fast. I would tend to do 1 to 2 days of water fast, and then I would like to do however many days I felt like of juice after that. And so that's how I'd break the fast, and then I would juice, and then I would go back on to, taper back onto the diet. So that was kind of my main fast. I did that one probably 10 times or so. And then other than that, I did a bunch of 7-day juice fasts. I did the whole mucoid plaque thing with the psyllium husk a handful of times, and which that's a whole another story about like mucoid plaque and the psyllium husk situation. I do think it's cleansing, but also if you mix psyllium husk with some clay binders and you mix it in water, it basically turns into a jelly. So I think when people like hold up the stick with the mucoid plaque, I'm like, well, you did turn yourself into a mucoid plaque factory. A psyllium husk jelly factory. I do think it's really binding, but it's not like fully what they say. But then intermittent fasting was the other thing I would do. I would oftentimes fast until about 12 o'clock each day and only drink water or some tea with stevia and stuff like that.
Interesting. Yeah, here in Bali, a few people, and I've done it, do Zen cleanse, but I also got a bit skeptical. Similar, it's like that GI broom kind of. But then in July, I did 2 weeks of water fasting, and it was different, but I actually had quite a bit of release on day 12, actually. So
really,
I definitely think mucoid plaques are real, but they might not be, what you get out after using the broom, the psyllium husk.
Yeah. I think I think the mucoid plaque is real, but I think that like we were saying, I think that the psyllium husk process, I think it actually could be a broom, but I think that what I would like for people to understand is that the broom is the psyllium husk thing that you pull up. That's like not all the stuff that came out of your intestines. It's like that's kind of what you drank and it turned into a jelly in the belly.
Yeah. That's good. So let's get a bit more into the fitness side, right? Because I'd love for you to share a little bit. Like you're really fit. People can go on your Instagram. I'll put the links in the description, and that's why I interview you also. That's a path I'm on, is how can I be eating super healthy and vibrant and look, feel good, perform well. And I feel you've achieved that a lot through calisthenics mainly. So can you share a bit more?
Absolutely, man. So I would say it's like a threefold system, essentially. It kind of starts with mindset, because what we will see with basically any endeavor in life is that if we don't have the discipline to stick with something and we're still lending into addictive patterns, which I define an addictive pattern as any type of short-term pleasurable activity that you do that trades the well-being and the success of tomorrow for that fleeting pleasure of today. And so that can be drugs, alcohol, even like, surface level sex and things like that. So mindset is sort of the key to the whole thing. And it's also a positive feedback loop, that as you develop the mindset to lean into positive habits, when you start to do the positive habits, it takes effort because it's not easy, and it's simple often, but it's not necessarily easy. It takes effort to lean into these things. And often in the beginning stages, it's not comfortable either, because we're getting the gears going, we're getting the physiology moving, we're starting to stir up some of the stuff we maybe need to go ahead and pass out of our body. But as we push through that initial stage, which isn't even that long, it just takes a little bit of effort to get the ball rolling, then we start to get these dopamine increases that instead of just plummeting off, they actually go up over a couple hours, taper for 4 hours, and then level out for 4 hours, and then kind of taper off at the end. So we get that dopamine increase. We get as we continue on, we get to see an increase in our strength. That's also a positive feedback. We get to see over time an improvement in our physique. That's a positive feedback. We feel better, we look better, we feel better about the decisions we're doing. And all of this feeds back into the discipline to stay on track with it. So that's kind of the mindset aspect. And it's not possible to really talk about one aspect without talking about all of them. So the mindset is the will to get going with it. And then the next aspect is, I would say, the whole food plant-based diet, which I encourage people to transition into a whole food plant-based diet, 20% calories from fat, to make sure the insulin sensitivity is great and that people are feeling energized by the diet, and aiming for 50+% raw, just to make sure that they're getting that energetic kind of quality in the diet. But the real key here is that they're, through some of the guides that I have and the guidance that I have in my membership and things, I teach them how to get onto a diet that is sustainable, that's well researched, that's well studied, that is most associated with positive health outcomes, with 100 years of cumulative nutritional data, etc. So people feel safe, people feel like it's something they can sustain, and they start to feel and they don't detox too hard. That's another part of it too, is they don't necessarily start to detox too hard too fast, because if you go too raw too fast off a standard American diet, you may run into some issues. So my goal is to give them the foundation of wellness, and then that becomes the foundation that they can then experience going more. And then I encourage to go more raw over time, and they can see what is causing what whenever they kind of branch out. Whenever they indulge in things, then it's obvious to see, oh, this is how I feel when I ate the cake after eating pretty clean for a while. And so also the whole food plant-based diet, because it's got the high fiber content, high water content, and high nutrient content, so it's calorically not so dense, it's nutritionally dense, then because our stomachs are satiated by volume, they're eating to satiation, getting plenty of nutrients, but not eating excess calories. It's very hard to eat excess calories on a whole food plant-based diet. Then they naturally come to the optimal weight. And so that optimal weight is sort of like, that's the whole foundation for your energy levels being right, for your body functioning correctly. And then simultaneously, I'm teaching people to do what I call high intensity, low volume calisthenics. And so it's basically the understanding that you don't need tons of exercise and tons of muscular stimulation to achieve a very fit and natural physique. You don't need protein supplements. You don't need any fitness supplements really to achieve your optimal physique. And so if you're doing these high intensity calisthenics while having the proper diet, and you've got the mindset to stay consistent with it for a period of time, then you'll naturally start to see the muscles build from underneath, and you'll see the fat layer reduce on the top, and the physique will transform. And so depending where you're at, where your starting point is, you will be able to see physiological changes in a relatively short amount of time. So somebody who's already kind of lean will see changes in their physique in 90 days if they're really doing the high intensity workout. And so what I describe as high intensity, and this is an important aspect of it, because we're doing low volume, it's important that we do put a lot into our workouts. And so what does that mean for calisthenics or workouts in general? It means that when we do any one of the exercises, that we actually push the repetitions all the way to the point where we cannot go through the full range of motion of the last rep. So I call that going to failure. The reps before failure, those ones where you're no longer in the easy reps, you're now having to put in a lot of energy to go through the range of motion, those are called grinding reps. And the grinding reps are where the majority of micro tears are occurring in the muscle, where the lactic acid is building up, and where when you have adequate nutrition afterwards, they will build up stronger and larger than before. So that's kind of the whole system in a nutshell. The type of calisthenics I teach is basically variations of push-ups, pull-ups, and squats 3 times a week with a rest day in between, and about a 30-minute to 40-minute session. So it ends up being 1 to 2 hours of calisthenics per week.
Yeah, that's low and efficient. I have a question on going to failure, especially on exercises like push-ups and pull-ups. Are you concerned that for me, I feel if I really go until failure on a pull-up or a push-up, it's really hard to maintain good form. And I feel like I end up cheating with either wiggling my body or like is that a concern?
As
Like, do you
long
want
as
to
you're
be
not,
more just functional? Okay, let's do the last one. Okay, you just need to get up, or do you really focus on getting the right muscles?
I definitely focus on form still. I definitely still focus on form. The main key is that you're not like starting to like really try and favor one arm or get out of balance and accidentally like tweak something weird. But like if you practice good form from the get-go and your grinding reps, you continue to maintain good form, and then your final rep, you're maintaining good form, but you're not able to go through the full range of motion, then that's really kind of the ideal. Because when we're doing the beginner style of calisthenics movements, we're building the foundation for more advanced movements, and we're building the muscle, the joint stabilization, we're building all of that. And so as good a form as possible is ideal. But of course, like whenever I'm doing pull-ups and I start to get to those final reps, I hitch more. It's called hitching, where you use more of the momentum of your whole body rather than just like a perfect pull-up. But then, one more little tidbit on there is, if you're out there doing exercise, then you're winning to some extent. If you're out there doing exercise and you're going high intensity and you're doing good form for the most part, and you're not like hurting yourself, then you're winning.
It's interesting when I look at exercise can be combined. But for example, you probably know Ted Carr, and he's also advocating for more like a high intensity, but not too much. And he says actually a lot of people, they overtrain, they spend too much time in the gym, and actually their strengths and muscles don't really grow sometimes because of that. And at the same time, I feel the natural way is also like, if we were in nature, we'd probably do some sprints and some high intensity sometimes, but we'd also move a lot, right? And when I look at you, I think, okay, you're doing those high intensity, it works a lot, but you're also a builder. So you're actually moving a lot during your day. Like your whole job is about moving. So sometimes I wonder, okay, what's really working there? Is it to be really more active all day and do physical things, and that's how you build really that physique, or is it more that session at the high intensity?
Well, I can tell you, I definitely haven't been steady with my calisthenics workout for 15 years straight. I've gone in and out of good routines with calisthenics throughout the years. Always the good routine is in times of stability, whenever there's not as much stress, whenever we're like settled into a home for a period of time. And always where we fall out of our more positive habits is whenever something becomes unstable. Like, for example, in my case, it's anytime we had to move, we've moved about 5 times, where you start staying up later to pack, maybe you start doing some caffeine to try and like keep up with the energy, not getting up early anymore, doing the meditations and getting that in those endorphins and things that nourish us. And so you start to indulge it and in more instant gratifying things, and the less of the focus goes to the calisthenics and that sort of thing. And so I have certainly gone through my peaks and valleys, and I've been a builder the whole time. And I can 100% say that the physique that I have now, which is like where you can see obvious muscular development. Like it looks like I work out to some extent where my pectorals are bigger, my arms are bigger. You can see striations in my deltoids, etc. Even though I'm always lean and I'm always somewhat muscular, you can always see my abdominal muscles and things like that. I put on about 15 pounds of muscle whenever I get into this routine that I do, which is that maybe 2 hours max a week of the calisthenics. And so it definitely has a lot to do with actually going through the more high intensity movements. Now, do you have to go to the exhaustion point? No, but it's much easier to teach people to push towards the exhaustion point, especially in the early phases, because I actually sometimes will go within 3 reps of exhaustion because I know my body, and I know that still the majority of the positive work is happening during those grinding reps and within that 3-rep range of exhaustion. People who are new, they might think that they're exhausted 10 reps before, or 15 reps before they even get there. So it's better to just be like, go until you can't go through another one, take a few breaths and do one more. And then also that also sets the goal and the standard for observe what you did on the first workout that you've ever done, or if you've done it for a time, observe how many reps you did on that workout. Remember that or log it. I encourage people to log their repetitions and aim 5 above that next workout. So you're always the way that muscles grow is by taking the muscle a little past what you did last time, getting a little stronger, even if it's a fraction of a percent each workout. It really does build up. And even though I only put maybe 15 pounds of muscle on during a good routine, which I put about 15 pounds of muscle on this last year. Part of my story for this round is that I got in a scooter accident last year and I was pretty knocked down for 6 months or so. I was down to maybe like 145 pounds. In fact, I was about 145 pounds. So maybe I put basically 17 pounds of muscle on in a year after that scooter accident, after I got back into doing my workouts again.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, I'm interested also because you talked about your family and children. Well, first, I think it's really cool that so you have a job that takes a lot of time, and then you have 5 children, right? So no excuse. Basically, you're not like a yogi that has so much time, which is often let's say the stereotype of the raw vegan is that it's someone who has no responsibility and a lot of time. I'm also interested, yeah, for your children. I don't have children myself, but I have been a child, like everyone.
I remember.
And and I know there's always a tricky balance between showing them what's right and not creating rebellion or feeling like, oh, we're vegan, you can't have the meat, sorry. And then it creates something in them where they feel they want the thing that they can't have, so what was your experience with the children and do you feel they really embrace the nutrition you raise them with and that they'll keep that ongoing?
I really think that they're super solid in not harming animals as much as possible. Like they're like have the diehard vegan spirit in the sense that we actually we had our own permaculture farm back in Texas. We had like 50 animals, which were just all pets. And basically my wife, she got real into going on I don't know if you know what Craigslist is, but it's just like an online kind of market. And she would go and find all these animals. She'd be like, oh, there's just like 2 more bunnies. They're only 30 miles away. Can you go get them? So we were just like collecting animals whenever my 2 daughters were 2 and 3. And so they were raised with lots of little animals, even like miniature donkeys and miniature Shetland ponies and chickens and all the rest of it. And they deeply connected with those animals. Mm. They would even tell us stories about their social lives and everything. They're very intuitive and things. And so on that note, they definitely are. think that they're going to have a desire to eat meat. Besides possibly, and they're curious beings, of course, right? But they think it's pretty gross right now. My oldest is 12. My youngest, he's just 2, so he just does whatever everybody else does. They do have some curiosity about eggs from time to time, and because there's eggs, like, you know, the Balinese folks here, like their chickens are laying eggs and things like that, and they know that there's eggs in pastries and that sort of stuff, and so they have had eggs a handful of times just in that regard. And I don't really know what that's going to look like as they develop. I mean, as they do know about factory, like what happens in factory farms with the egg industry, and how the male roosters are just basically ground up, and how atrocious it is for the chickens. And so they're definitely not into that kind of thing. But you know, like somebody's well-loved chicken, even though it's like a totally unnatural hybridized animal at this point, and I don't support that. And I don't think that there's nutritive necessity. And I think that any sort of excess egg intake is going to cause issues. I don't know what they'll do with that. I don't have a desire to eat the eggs. And they pretty much 99% of the time don't say anything about it, but there have been a couple times. That's just being totally transparent. And in that way, we were just like, okay, you know, try an egg if you like it. But then oftentimes they smell the cooking pan after they ate the egg, and they're like, this is disgusting. Like they eat the thing. This is happened like 2 times since we've been here ever, and they were like, this smells disgusting. So that's the short answer there.
Yeah, so you still allowed them to have their own experience on this.
Yeah, definitely in that regard. I don't think I would cook them meat or anything like that. If they wanted to do that when they're older, then that's their own thing. But the world does not need any more suffering, and the animals definitely don't need any more suffering. And the data is just so clear towards greatly reducing, if not completely eliminating meat. You know, the data is basically conclusive that 95% plant-based is absolutely optimal, and it appears that 100% is even better than that. And so being that there's no nutritive necessity, and believe me, I've done tons of research, I've done thousands of hours of nutritional research, and I've tried to see, is there any nutritive necessity? Because we have to, especially with children, go into something like this responsibly. And I truly don't believe that there's any nutritive necessity for animal products at all. And so, especially as we heal the gut microbiome, more things are synthesized than we even realize in the gut microbiome. And adding in, I actually believe in doing some ferments, some natto and some krauts and things like that. Doing those things cover the B12 and K2 profile. There's just nothing that you can't get from plants. And so we're very, very oriented in doing the most healthy, compassionate, and even like spiritually uplifting diet as possible. And for the most part, the kids are on board with that.
Amazing.
The kids, yeah. I'm trying to come to a good conclusion to that conversation. The kids are different in this way, that once they've tasted something, like it creates they experience the dopamine spike just like anybody. And so there's this issue with we live around all these Balinese stands, and they're cooking these rich food and this disgusting oil and things like that. And then the neighbors are constantly giving the kids food and stuff like that. And so our kids have tasted like these fried veggie cakes and thing like that. And then because they've tasted that richness, then there's a little bit of rebellion. They're like, we just want some more richness or something like that. And so it's definitely a fine line of really wanting to take care of the body, especially in this day and age where basically most of the processed food have graphene oxide and other crap like that in it. And we know that the majority of these refined foods are not made with the intention of keeping people healthy and empowered. Then we really try and keep them as pure as possible without creating this divide between us. And so the way I'll conclude that is that it is a challenge that we face. Though our kids are smart, our kids are like totally advanced, amazing children, and I trust in their process and the unfolding.
Yeah, thanks for sharing honestly. And it is hard because even like in Bali, we probably have a better environment in general, but yeah, the Balinese aren't very advanced in terms of their nutrition and their health overall. And that's why I think in that context it would be more helpful to live in a conscious community, right? To avoid those
Absolutely.
temptations, because on one hand, um, it's true that we want maybe sometimes children to have their own experience. So it's not like there's a rule, and that's why we're vegan. That's why you don't use the social media, etc. But at the same time, those things are addictive by nature, so we also need to protect them in a way, right? So the
Yeah.
ultra stimulating foods, the ultra stimulating, like, yes, the same with using the phone a lot. It's
Yeah.
always a challenge I can see in the parents around me.
Well, you know what the one of the big challenges also is that if you become too rigid, then there will be a more tendency for the children to lie because they want to do, and I know this in my own pattern growing up is like whenever my parents were over strict or over rigid, which I don't even think they were being unreasonable for the things that I wanted to do, drinking at a young age and things like that. But I kept secrets from them. I hid things, and so it really is a fine balance. And I oftentimes, you know, look to the super conscious and be like, show me. I don't know, just like give me the guidance to be as um, calm, patient, compassionate, but also a rock, and to keep my children safe, because it does come down to that in this day and age. It's not just like, oh, they're eating bad food. It's like there is warfare on human consciousness at this point, and so there's more at stake. So it's like, no, I don't want you to eat that candy you just found on one of the offerings, because it's like the lowest quality possible and came from some factory somewhere, and who knows what they're putting in that stuff. And so, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
tricky situation.
Yeah. I think I agree with that, and probably a lot of people who listen can see that. I'd love to gravitate for the end of this interview towards like building the new earth, because you're also a builder, and you work with our friend Juan also, and people who are very aligned on creating, let's say, buildings and architectures are in line with nature, that are better for the energetics overall. And I think soon we will co-create together, because I'm also deep into co-creating conscious communities. And um, yeah, my friends and I, we love your work, what you're doing in Wanu, in many places. So, well, one thing I wanted to ask also is, you've been a mycologist also.
Mm-hmm.
And a week ago, we did an interview with a guy who got basically messages from a channel, and she was saying the homes of the future will be made of mushroom. I don't know if you have any plans to build with mushrooms.
Sure, absolutely, man. So we basically, all that what that comes down to is somehow creating a brick out of some sort of fibrous, carbohydrate rich or cellulose rich material, running the mycelium across that brick, and then somehow like compacting that and petrifying it in some way. Now, the ability to potentially create a mycelial network and then pressure pump some sort of solidifying fluid into the network would be a very cool option. So I don't know exactly what that fluid is, and what it could be, some sort of bioresin, a highly, what's the opposite of viscous other than, non-viscous solution that you were actually able to pump or hydraulically press into the mycelial network. That would create an incredibly strong sort of brick that way. So I think that's really cool. Maybe we could do something with coconut core. Maybe we could do something with, yeah, the technology is right on the other side of research and development, and research and development is right on the other side of investment, and investment is right on the other side of some well written business plans that that look like they're going to keep us put us in the green, which nobody, anybody, you and I, we don't care about getting rich, making tons of money. But we do in this time of transition, whenever so much of the energy is tied up in the money, we have to integrate our visions and technologies into successful and profitable businesses, which become the model for actually how a system becomes perpetual. So that's, whenever I say that, I start to think about how basically like everything is toric. Every sort of self-organization system is toric. If we look at nature and we look at all scales of the universe, even a business is this way. It takes a certain amount of input and a certain amount of resources, intelligence, organization, etc., to get the energy flowing. It requires a certain amount of people, a certain scale of people to do all the different tasks at that perfect scale of organization. And then it takes the actual assembly, all the processes of the business, whether it be making micro bricks or whatever, and then it has an output that then is profitable, so the energy comes back into the system. So then we get this self-organization of charge, and so that business then becomes a toroid in itself. And this is how a community looks. We've got all the different aspects of a community that are necessary. We got the water, we got the food, and we basically the energy, we've got the infrastructure, we've got the architecture, etc. All these things we have to transition from the infrastructure, the degenerative, extractive infrastructure that is currently in place and that the majority of the population relies on, even you and I to some extent. And we have to replace them, every aspect of that, with the regenerative version. And the beautiful thing is that much of it's already developed, and all the rest of it is just on the other side of some investment and research and development. And so like the other cool aspect of it is that basically all the technologies, all the regenerative technologies essentially break down to implosive technologies. So going from the explosive, extractive, sort of burning fuels and things to create propulsion, to turn generators and do work to create electricity, et cetera, to actually creating implosive fields through using proper geometry, proper site selection, proper materials, etc., to create an implosive vortex that then spins back out and creates these toric fields to start, instead of propelling generators, we start to impel, and we start to create magnetic energy from magnetism. And once you got energy, everything else, then you basically can do everything else. I mean, we can turn salt water into pure water. It's like, so yeah, that's like the kind of big picture. I've got like my own perspective on the steps and how, where we are, what so basically it's like where we are with our current civilization is that all the problems that we face with our current civilization are based in scarcity of resources. If we don't have resources, then we have to trade our time for money to buy resources. So we're now scarce in time. So then we're scarce in time to spend with our family. When there's not this time for connection, then it leads to disconnection and conflicts that arise because people are not having their needs met, because there's not the enough abundance for this connection, for conflict resolution. All the issues that come from not having enough resources create crime, create trauma, create conflict. And these traumas in a scarcity-based system, which if we look at 99% of all the resources on the planet are controlled by 1% of the population, then scarcity is manufactured. It could have to do with the Kali Yuga and that as well, just being in this time of, composting and breakdown to create the rich, fertile soil for the new earth, the golden era. Then in that time, then like the scarcity basically creates this traumatic sort of environment and creates all the issues that we see. And so as we transition into this new earth, then we still are carrying the echoes of trauma held in the subconscious mind. So there's got to be a simultaneous trauma resolution process, which we can look at the ancient shamanic processes of guiding people in the subconscious mind and creating resolution through acting things out, through imagery, etc. There are already many trauma resolution processes that are very effective that basically bring people into a slight hypnotic state, allow them to stand up for the inner child, for the child that was abandoned and that was left traumatized, that then the subconscious mind created a protection program around that trauma that's in a loop in your mind, you know, going on and kicks in unconsciously when you get triggered, etc. So there are ways to resolve these traumas, and these traumas, why that's important is because it's very hard not only to live in a family whenever you have these traumas kicking in and you're getting into relationships and stuff and you see these unconscious behaviors that play out, but it's even more challenging to live in a community because, you know, the easy way to put it is everybody's got broken toes, and whenever we all get together in one space, we tend to step on each other's broken toes. So there is this challenge and opportunity that we face to heal the trauma from to heal these unconscious programs from the traumas of scarcity, while remedying the scarcity in itself through implosive technologies, free energy technologies, etc. And so we have to, the imagery is that you can heal the traumas, but if you're still in a dirty fish bowl, those traumas are going to continue to recirculate. So there's this simultaneous process that we'll go through of trauma resolution through deeply connecting with one another, the foundation being in this sort of recognition that we're not the mind, we're not the limitations of the mind, we're not the limitations of this body, but in the deepest aspect of our truth is that we're all the same spirit watching through all eyes. And being rooted in that awareness of this, you know, it's called self-realization, being rooted in that awareness allows us to have the deepest sense of compassion. And when we have that deepest sense of compassion, then we can develop devotion. Devotion is the willingness to witness each other through all the messiness. And so that's what a marriage is. We basically agree to witness ourselves through another for a life. And that basically the vows that me and my wife had to each other was that no matter how lost we get, no matter how deep the stories get, no matter how many stories we make up, we'll always return to the heart and we'll always find God within one another. And we've gone through that process so many times. And the devotion is the only thing that allows it to be possible, because anybody who's been through these challenging situations knows that you start fantasizing about how much better it would be on the other side if you could just have a partner who understood you this way, or you just had, you know, this other situation. But then with maturity, you realize that you can't escape your own stuff. It presents itself perhaps through different angles and different experiences. It'll continue to present itself to you. And so all that to say is that I found that I really look at it in a fractal sense. Like, I think that it begins with you. It begins with you being honest, humble, witnessing yourself for all your incredible gifts, but also the unconscious patterns that you've accumulated through the traumas of scarcity, ancestral traumas and all. Having compassion for yourself, knowing that it's all part of the perfect process, etc. But then leaning into the solution, leaning into the solution-based mindset. And so part of that is developing the will, developing the discipline to start eating more compassionately, going towards a vegan diet. We've got plenty of research to show us at this point that you're going to be fine. You're probably going to live longer. Just go for it. You can still, if you want to be a bodybuilder, you can do that. But ultimately, you can be a very healthy individual. If you stop eating animals, your consciousness is also going to shift. And this is part of the trauma resolution process. You start leaning into doing more fitness for yourself. You gain confidence, you gain courage, you become a role model. And ultimately, you continue to trade these vices for the virtues. And what that does is that you develop self-love, self-respect. You put the animalistic nature where it belongs, down in the digestion, where you don't need to think about it. And you bring the higher will and the higher consciousness to the throne. And you start steering from that place where you know for example, with marriage, some people will say, we're all meant to be polyamorous and da 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 da. And like, okay, maybe something like that in like a tribal situation or whatever, where everybody knows everybody loves each other. It could be more of a natural situation for there be multiple partners. But my experience is that I, in the marriage, have traded my animalistic lusts to be with multiple women, because it exists, like I can get in touch with that. Like I can be, attracted to many different women and things like that. But I've traded that, and I've traded my freedom as a bachelor. I've traded these things for something higher and something better and something more righteous, if you will, without trying to get too much into like religious words and things like that. And what that is the devotion to my wife, so that she can feel like she's in as stable of a scenario as possible, so that she can be most nurturing and caring for my children, so that my children have the most stable environment possible for them to feel safe. And because if you think about a turtle doesn't actually come out of its shell if it feels threatened. It's the same with children. If children have too much chaos, then their nervous system, their reptilian brain is constantly, the adrenaline's just a little bit higher, and it doesn't allow for the unfolding as much. So when we trade the animalistic nature for the higher will, when we can see these higher outcomes, then that's the development of discipline. That's the development in the rethroning of the higher will. And when we do that, we show up more powerfully for ourselves. We show up more powerfully for our families. And we show up more powerfully for our careers and our altruistic works. And when we build strong, devoted families, then this is the next scale of foundation for strong, devoted communities. And so this is what I think. I think it all starts with you, but there's no one piece is complete without the whole. So yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And even on the money part, I've seen in some community, let's say, trials where you remove the money too quickly, actually we lose accountability, we lose integrity sometimes, or responsibility. So it's not all black and white. And I think we can both agree that it has taken a lot of power, too much in our world, but there's probably going to be some transitions. And I love that like for you right now, it's more your family and the business thriving. Do you feel the timeline of being in a community, most likely in Bali, with permaculture, natural buildings, free energy, and other really cool technologies, conscious people around decentralized governance? Do you feel living in these kind of communities far away or pretty close?
So,
well, to start with, is that a desire of yours? Because
it absolutely is a desire of mine.
Yeah.
It is absolutely a desire of mine. And I think that that when I was younger, I actually thought it was closer than I do now. Now, I am also very open to miraculous transformation in short periods of time. And I think that even the pressures that are put onto the planet catalyze these things, alchemically catalyze. When you put pressure on an experiment, then it actually catalyzes the reaction. And so we may be in a situation where we just got to dive in and face what comes up, which is, that's a lot of how my life has gone also, is that, you're not necessarily ready for every next step, but you're clear in the vision, the opportunity arises, and having, being oriented in inspiration-based living, we take those steps into the unknown. The step always lands beneath the feet, doesn't always look like we expect, but it always takes us to the next perfect synchronicity and opportunity. So I think that there's definitely a possibility that opportunity could arise for us. Right now, the most natural progression that I see, if things continue on with some semblance of stability in the world stage for another 30 years or so, 15, 20, 30 years, something like that. So I think that a lot of abundance and a lot of resources are about to get unlocked for a lot of people. I think the next bull market with the crypto, you know, assuming they don't crash the entire economy before then, I don't think that that's the cycle that's going to happen just yet. I think we're going to get a boom. And there's going to be a lot of resources that flow into a lot of conscious people's hands. Also, there's about to be a lot of resources flow into a lot of new technologies, including the company I work, you know, it's me and Juan's company, BioArc. I think that there's a lot of resources and there's already a lot of potential investment coming into that. And there's already proof of concept and even measurements on the energetic optimization of the spaces and things like that. That what will happen is that we'll start to invest in land next to each other, like very close proximity together, where we have shared spaces, shared gardens, and where we start to do community activities together. We even start to have meetings. We just start to lean into these things. But even one of the big important things is that we start to embed together. Now this is getting into fractal terminology, but this is where when we get clear about who our soul family is and who we actually think that we want to become our family, who we think we're ready to devote with. And this basically comes to that self-realization aspect, is like, when we see God in one another, then we're really like, we're getting to that same frequency. And when we do this, then what we can start to do is we can start to have bliss together. And the most kind of sustainable, natural way to do that is to start to eat meals together. Dan Winter talks about this a lot. Dan Winter is my main mentor on fractal physics. I consider him one of the greatest people on the planet. He's just like an amazing genius and compassionate, deep-hearted man. We start to have meals together. We start to do yoga together. We start to have community events. We tell each other about our most held secrets. We reveal our shame. We reveal our pain. We laugh together. We cry together. And this allowance, when we do these things, we actually become self-similar, meaning our geometry starts to become more natural, more golden mean. Because if you think about what happens if you have a secret, it's basically you take an experience, a thought, an energetic pattern, and you clench down around it. And then the energy is no longer able to be shared and is no longer able to flow to others and things like that. And so it becomes an energetic blockage. And so whenever we're able to actually start having bliss together, express our secrets, start to feel safe, knowing that we're going to still be loved and accepted and stuff like that, then something really powerful starts to happen, is we actually begin to experience ourselves as a family, as one, and the devotion increases. And so from that place, as we truly become devoted, then we can start to talk about combining all of our resources. We're obviously going to start overlapping and sharing as much as possible. More than anything, I want to be generous with everybody in my community, my family. But what we have to also be mature and recognize is that there are echoes of trauma, of scarcity that are in our subconscious minds. And so that's when you take away money in a community, you still have this sense of like some issues that come up because not everybody is 100% sure that they're going to be okay and that everybody else is going to do whatever it takes to take care of them. So through this process of getting closer together, buying land together, sharing resources but not sharing all the resources just yet, because that's just too much for our little subconscious minds who we're still trying to take care of those inner children who are scared. But we nurture that care, we nurture that devotion to one another, and we have bliss. Our auras literally start to embed and our karma becomes intertwined. So you got to choose wisely. Who do you want to actually intertwine your karma with? Because this really could lead to us ascending or traveling the stars together in our auric bodies and our plasma bodies. And so, yeah, that's my thing in a nutshell. Is I do think that's where we're going, is community living. And the next most practical step that I can see is bringing those resources, sharing our resources, combining them into our projects, into our gardens, into our technologies, into all of our well-being. And then from there, nurturing that connection and moving into the next deeper level of connection.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Josh. I feel very aligned with that and excited for this probable future to come.
Yeah, absolutely, man. We'll keep holding the vision, brother.
Yeah.
I have a saying. It's I step forward. I step I lean into the vision so graciously bestowed. I lean into the vision so graciously bestowed, and I bow and surrender to whatever unfolds.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like having the vision and at the same time letting go of being too attached to specific outcomes.
It's going to be different than we
dance.
expect.
Yeah.
It's going to be different. It's probably going to be better. I mean, I like that. I like to have that belief. There's going to be more, especially if as we continue to implode, get closer to center. It's going to be blissful. So, yeah, man.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Josh. Yeah, it's been really interesting. I mean, we could go for much longer, but I think that's a good one for now. Is there anything you'd like to share as a last thought to our listeners?
I just want to like share some love with everybody, and just want to thank everybody for showing up and saying yes to life. And I know it's really intense times, and it can be scary at times. There's a lot of question marks, but I truly believe that when we lean in and when we say yes and we open to the possibility, we ask for guidance. We ask for guidance from that super consciousness, from that higher self, which is what we all share, that the unfolding is absolutely perfect, and everybody is playing their perfect part, even the dark elites and this and that. They're just puppets. And that even at some scale, because everybody answers to somebody, at some scale there's a conspiracy for all the good. And at some scale, who's conspiring? It's the great spirit, the mighty one with the great mind. And so I think everything's going to be all right. Love you guys. Thanks for saying yes. Let's keep leaning into the vision together. I know we share it. And I just wish you the best of health always.